Hi there, and welcome to Be a Global Citizen, the podcast that explores the concept of global citizenship through the lens of value-creating education. My name is Scott Bauer, and I'm a Soka researcher and educator. I hope you find the discussions, stories, and insights on this podcast to be valuable and inspiring as we strive to become global citizens who are committed to living a contributive life. Enjoy the conversation.
Hi, everybody. My name is Abir Catovic, and I'm based in New Jersey. I've been in education for a long time, for more than 30 years. I started off teaching actually when I was in college. I decided to go teach in the weekend school that brought me up. And from there, I pursued my education and actually I was an engineer. So I started my career off as a computer and electrical engineer. But then when my oldest was starting school, I decided to help. We founded a faith-based school with some family members and friends, and we started off that school with 27 students, and now the school is a pre-K to 12th grade school with more than 600 students. Yeah, they have a waiting list. I know I'm no longer associated with that school. I worked there for 25 years. As a teacher and an administrator, always been in administration because when you start a school, that's where you go. And then I moved on to another private school, another faith-based private school, and I was with them for about, I think, 4 years. I started off like as vice principal, and then I became principal, and I helped that school. It was a small school. I helped them also, and then I left them after 4 years, and now I'm doing independent consulting to help those who want to teach and so on. And that's why I'm also pursuing my master's and having a great time at the same time.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Abir, for joining me on the podcast. I feel very honored to have you, someone who's had so much experience, like many decades of experience working in different schools and having founded your own faith-based school. That is very admirable, and it takes a lot of hard work and just grit to be able to pull something off and to see it grow in that way. I'm sure it brings you a great sense of pride knowing that you are leaving this impact on your communities and still going further, right, with consulting and looking to new endeavors like horizons to support more students. I'm very interested in your background, considering that you are an engineer by training. Specifically, you said computer and electrical engineering, both of which I know very little about. So I'm curious to hear, like, kind of what led you on that path, and then what about education really spurred you to pivot and dedicate yourself in the way that you have. And so I guess this question is really like, yeah, from engineering to educator. Can kind of maybe speak a little bit about what was that like? Kind of what were the defining moments that led you to where you are? And then also maybe even thinking about kind of like the early influences of like what kind of set you on that path. I know that you mentioned faith-based school, so I would imagine that your religion, your faith plays a really important role. And so, please, I would love to hear more about that as well.
Sure. Thank you. Well, first I have to thank you, Scott, for inviting me. I feel very privileged to be here too. So thanks a lot for having me today. So let's see. So what's my path? So what my path is I was born in Egypt, in Alexandria, Egypt, and my parents immigrated to the United States. I came to the United States I think I came a couple of times. I came when I was younger, when I was really little, and my mom, she had kind of culture shock, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, this is so different than Egypt," and she took us back. But then she brought us back again because my dad stayed in the United States, and so I came to the United States like permanently when I was in third grade. So we started in third grade, and it was such a culture shock for me. I remember just pretending to be sick every week. So I would take an extra day off because it really was culture shock. It was just so different. By the way, my name is Abir. So you can imagine the taunting of this name, that it sounds like a beer. So, that kind of difficulty and having to deal with that, definitely. So So basically, growing up in public school, the pressure to assimilate, the fact that I was Muslim, and my parents cared about our faith, so we had a weekend school, so we had like a Sunday school. So there's a great divide. Like I felt it growing up the whole time. You know what I mean? Between what's happening in public school and what they're teaching us, and again, I'm not anti-public school. I'm 100% that we should have public education, 150%, 200%. We definitely should be supporting public education. But the problem with the assimilation aspects of which could be different, but my daughter just finished public school, so it hasn't changed much, unfortunately, since my time. So if you care, in terms of Islam in the United States, and it's not just in the United States, there's a whole lot of Islamophobia, and there's a lot of bad talk about Islam. And so growing up in a public school where you're a kid and you don't know your religion well, and then the politics takes turns, and then you as a student have to defend your faith against teachers who know a whole lot more than you, that was really difficult. So whether it's students in class or adults, that is really hard. That's a lot of pressure to put on a student. And I mean, it's still happening today. You hear about, the prejudice and so on, and the bullying of Muslim kids in public school and even like fancy private schools. And the kids are so scared because sometimes the bullies are the teachers. It's not the students. So you have people who don't understand the faith, who've been taught, there's a lot of, I'd say, garbage out there about the faith, which is it's very sad. And people are even afraid to ask. You know what I mean? They're like, I would love every person, I love people asking me about my faith and me having to explain things. I'm not an expert, but, I've done my own research and everything. And so those existential questions have been answered by my religion, so I'm confident enough in what I believe that I can explain why I believe it. So growing up in that, I graduated and so on. And when it came to college, I come from immigrant parents. So immigrant parents, say, my dad was very strict and said, you are going into a career where you will have a job when you walk out. Like, there was no, there was no liberal arts. There was none of that happening. So I was a math and, I'm a math and science geek. I always loved that, and I still love math and science. And so I did engineering, even though I didn't even know what engineering was. I was thinking engineering like on a train, like, an engineer. Like, I don't know. So I went into engineering, and I loved it. I mean, I'm a study geek. My kids laugh at me all the time. I am a nerd. I love books. I love to study. I love to take notes. And so that's what I pursued, and I graduated, and I got a good job and all that. All that good stuff that you're supposed to do. And I did that. And I got married. I got married while I was in college. And I got married. And after I graduated and when I was working, we had our first child. And it's interesting because I had no thought of any kind of faith-based school or anything. I was planning to put my child in public school and so on. And what I realized, Scott, it was really interesting. I had buried all of that trauma. And I'm not one of those people who believes in a lot of this stuff, but I literally had it buried. And it didn't come out until after I had my child. And I went back to work after, whatever, my leave. And I was driving down my street and I passed by a student who's standing at the bus stop. And all of a sudden, all of my memories of what public school was like just came back. It this flash flood of, oh my God, I can't do that to my son. No way. I can't have him, because it's so traumatic that I literally buried it. I didn't even realize it until that happened. And so my husband and I talked about homeschooling and so on and so forth. And then it happened that actually my sister-in-law was thinking the same thing. And she's like, we got to do something, like, it's not working. And so then that's when we said, okay, let's do it. And we approached our local masjid or mosque. We approached them and said, we'd like to start a school. And it was kind of interesting because somebody else tried to start a school the year before and they failed. So that was, so we had to do a lot of convincing, so it's like, try really have faith in us, and we'll do a good job. And I was funny because some of like my close friends from the beginning of that school, I remember one of them is like, and so what is going to happen to our children when the school closes down next year? I'm like, what are you talking about? Close down? We're never going to close down. And it was kind of like, that can do attitude, we can do it. So we basically started, and we started with 27 students from, we had like pre-K 3 from 3-year-olds, and our oldest grade was first grade. And each year we just built, the first graders had to go to second grade. So the next year we had to add second grade. And, I think it was only one year we added like fourth and fifth grade. Like that was the only anomaly. But basically we grew it just every year until we got all the way to high school. There, we really deliberated hard at the, like for middle school, the eighth to ninth. Like, can we really do this? Like, can we be good at high school, and should we do it, and so on. And the parents of the eighth graders really had confidence in us, and they said, you took us all this way, like you can't desert us, you know. And so we went all the way through high school, and the first, our first graduating class was 4 students. Our first graduating class was 4 students, and at the graduation, I think we had more than 250 people, because it was like a community like celebration. Oh my gosh, we cried our eyes out because like, going through that journey, that was big, that was a really big, a big journey that we took, but it was awesome. I mean, I'm still close with the students. They're like my family. I get messages from them. I always told them, because I taught. So in this journey of mine, I've had the absolute privilege, because I love students, I love kids. I've had the absolute privilege of teaching every grade from KG to 12th. So I have taught every grade, which is just so awesome. Like, I love being in any class with students. Their innocence and how good they are. Adults are difficult, but students are awesome. You can speak straight and, discuss some of the toughest topics and so on, but it's so rewarding. So from that, that experience, I have lifelong friends. I mean, these students are like, they're like family. Anywhere I see them, they're very much like, because I always said, like, you're like my kids and I want the best for you. So it's been a really awesome experience. I'm very grateful for that.
Wow, I'm just taken aback by just how much you just shared. Because clearly, like by the way that you're sharing it, it's so important to you. You're so passionate about the work that you had done with this school, but it continues on even though even if you're not still working at the school. The lives that were touched, the friendships that were made, the community that was built, it's still there, right? And you're still tied to that. And so I think that's amazing. And I just wanted to point out that, this effort to grow the school from, one year to the next, building out until the high school, and having this graduation of 4 students with like over 200, almost 300 people just showing up. Like, that's beautiful. That really puts the phrase, it takes a village to raise a child. Like, that contextualizes it so perfectly in your story. So just amazing. I'm so happy to hear that, you had this success story, where it wasn't like, oh, like people just telling you the school's going to close down next year, right? But that you never gave up. And I think that this can-do spirit, as you had put it, and then also never giving up, as I'm kind of framing it, really speaks to the kind of work ethic and mentality that a lot of immigrants had while coming to the US. And this definitely includes your parents as well. And so I would imagine that while you experienced culture shock, your parents also experienced a lot of the culture shock. So now that you are a parent yourself, I believe you said you had 5 children.
Yes.
So you have pretty big family, I would say, and the demands of being a parent, and kind of still carrying these traumas and these experiences that you suffered as a child. Does that give you any perspective on how your parents must have been navigating coming to the U.S. when they were your age, or not your age, but like when they recently arrived? Like, are there any reflections that you have on that in terms
Sure,
of what
sure.
they went through?
So I think that's one of the things that I mean, I think Western culture, which is now dominant all over the world, so it's really not Western culture, is this like we divide generations and we kind of make it seem as if that we have nothing to do with each other. You know what I mean? Like when I was younger, you know, I looked at my parents as so foreign, especially, and that's the whole thing about assimilation. They spoke a different language. So, you know what I mean? When, you know, in at my time, I know nowadays there's a little bit more respect that, for foreign languages or other languages. But at that time, you know, if you didn't speak English well, you know, you had an accent, you know, you're foreign, you don't know anything. You know what I mean? It's not that we respect another language and you actually have a culture and you actually have so many things about you. It's more like, oh, you don't speak English properly, so you must be a dummy. Like, you know, that's basically kind of the context. So, you know, growing up and in that kind of environment, you kind of try to I mean, really, I felt like I was distancing from my parents and that they're so foreign, you know, and they were an embarrassment, you know, like all of that kind of like awful stuff that you don't shouldn't have in a family. I think that's pretty awful, you know, for that to happen. So my parents, you know, they were hardworking people, and so you know, they had to like travel to a city far away. And my sister, I have a sister, this one sister, you know, I don't they don't use this term anymore, but I think it used to be called latchkey kids. You know, the kids that their parents left, you know, my parents left before we woke up to go to work, right? So we were responsible for taking care of ourselves and getting ourselves, you know, to school, whether it's a bus or whatever way to get to school. And we were latchkey. That means we had our own key. We had to come home on our own, and our parents didn't come home until, you know, after we were home. So it's kind of, you know, they tried to instill values either at nighttime, you know, after way after school hours, or really for my parents, I think the values were really the weekends. You know what I mean? Like the sitting down and the breakfast and the, you know, the storytelling and the sharing of values that was really done, you know, weekend time. Like you know, I can still picture our kitchen table. You know, that was, you know, where the stories, and my parents were all in the medical field. My mom's a pharmacist and my dad was like a CFO of a hospital. So they always saw the medical field. So they always shared, like they weren't hiding things. They shared what they saw and what they saw about the environment and, you know, what what went wrong, things that go wrong, things that go right, like, you know, just kind of values, like here's how you do, you know, like teenage pregnancy is a bad thing. That shouldn't be happening. You know what I mean? And people on drugs, that is not a good thing. Like, you know, those kind of stories, and they would tell stories. And I think the wisest of all, because I know you talk a lot about your mom and how brilliant she was raising you. I think I have the same type of mom, in that she was a pharmacist, and so she saw a lot of things, and she worked for like in places like Harlem, New York, before Harlem was what it is now. And so they saw a lot of things, and we saw a lot of things when we would go with them. Sometimes they would take us into the city and see things. But she was really wise. Like she knew this latchkey situation, that where we were on our own a lot, kind of left a lot of that, you know, a lot of room that we could do things that were not going to be good. So she was, I mean, God bless her. she she was the kind of person. I mean, when you think about it now, it's like more trauma, but it's okay, mom. It's all right. I appreciate it. It was the good kind of trauma. My mom would cut out articles, you know, like here is the kid who took drugs and jumped out the window, and she would, before she goes to work, she'd be leaving that on my dresser. Have a nice day. And I'd be like, sometimes I'd be like, oh my God, why is she leaving this horrible stuff for me to read? But really, this was her way of like, it's not about me. It's not me, your mom telling you, but look what's written here. You know what I mean? So they did a lot of, I remember my dad one time, in my time, they used to do like the don't do drugs movies and that kind of stuff. And I remember, you know, my parents were very strict. Immigrant parents are tough as nails. You know, we don't mess around. They don't mess around. So we had like a strict bedtime. And even into high school, I'd be like, Dad, I'm like, how old am I? Are you telling me to go to bed, right? But we were like, he would like get to bed, and we'd be like laying there. And he came into my room. I still remember it. I'm like, what is going on? He came into my room. We had gone to bed, and he's like, get up right now. I'm like, what? Like drill sergeant. I'm like, yes, Dad. He's like, get up right now. And my sister and I were woken up from our sleep to watch a movie about you know, a high school where the kids, you know, decided to take LSD and all this stuff, and they were jumping out and dying. And I'm like, why are you doing this? You know, as a kid, you're like, but that was their way of telling us don't do drugs. You know, this is like watch this and see what the negative consequences are. You know what I mean? Do it this way. So my parents, like in their wisdom, they knew that they were distant from us because of the culture, like the culture differences and so on and so, because they would talk about Egypt and I'd say, we're not in Egypt. Like, you know what I mean? Like I was a wise guy, the wisest mouth, God help me. So I always had an answer. So what they were intelligent enough is basically to use the culture that I'm in kind of to teach me what's right and what's wrong. And so with my kids, I was blessed that I don't have that culture separation. I grew up here. So for my kids, the rule in our house is like we talk about everything. Like everything is on the table. Like there's nothing. What I tell anybody who's a parent is like your children need to hear your voice and they need to hear your opinions, because if you don't fill their minds with your opinion, someone else is gonna fill it. Like, you know what I mean? If you're not having conversations about everything, you know what I mean? There's no taboo topics, there's no anything. Talk about everything and be very clear about it and allow, don't be mean or whatever. It's just like you talk about it, and you discuss it and you let them have input, and let your kids be free to make their judgments. They are their own human beings making their own decisions, you have to allow them that freedom, even though it's hard as a parent because you want the best for your kids and you don't want them to make mistakes. But part of being a parent is really letting that bird fly out of the nest, and maybe they'll fall. But I think the biggest thing is really open conversation, discussing anything and anything on the table and really discussing it. And that's really like one of the most valuable things.
Yeah, thank you so much, Abir. And it's clear that your parents, they really did all that they could to support you, and in many ways, I think they believed and trusted in your potential and your capability to, as you use the phrase, like the latchkey, right? Like to be able to kind of like make yourself food and get certain things taken care of during the day when they were out at work. And then I think these interactions that you had with your parents through storytelling and through these different means with which they can kind of give you messages, kind of from newspaper clippings or from like a movie, to really reinforce how their concern for you about going to bed early or not taking drugs is to be taken seriously, because of the kind of sacrifice that is very much the immigrant story in a lot of cases of like, we're here for you to have more opportunities. And not to put it all on just the children. I'm sure that opportunity was kind of really anchor the family and to kind of have deeper roots in this new and somewhat unfamiliar land. Of course, now, right, having spent the vast majority of your life here, now with your own family, with your children and your husband, like it's different. But I think this discussion about like assimilation and like closeness and values, it really resonates with me and with a lot of other people who perhaps have an immigrant parent or both parents are immigrants. And so I think maybe this question of like the distance that maybe was felt as a result of the culture shock. I'm curious to hear how faith and religion help to bridge that, at least within your nuclear family, because as you had already pointed out, from like the surrounding environment, and within public schools, the messaging was very, very different, if not hostile. And so, what was the conversation like just within your family, and
Sure.
what was that role?
Sure. Let me when you just said that, I just want to just to share just something with you because it came to my mind. Like like I'm really grateful for my parents, and they're like I guess they really stress that critical thinking and so on, and the observation and so on. And so even things like, I mean, it's kind of amazing that like I'm a grandma too, so I'm a mom of five and a grandmother of five. So the fact that I can still remember like things in my childhood that really stick out, like just shows how good they were. And I don't know if they realize it. Like I always tell them that it stuck what you said. But I remember like even visiting, like when we would visit other people I remember someone who's my age, like maybe it was a child my age, and my mom and my dad walked away from that and they said, they had this conversation, not in a bad way, but they had a conversation with us in that that family literally um would check what's inside the contents of their children's book bags because they didn't trust them. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's how they kept track of what their kids were doing. And my mom was like, she had a conversation. I think my dad was included in that. Like, that's not, we would never do that to you because, you know what I mean? Like, we have a certain amount of trust that this is not, that's not a bound, like, that's a boundary that we will not cross. You know what I mean? So they kind of just like, we're talking to you like a young, you know, a young adult. We're telling you what's right and what's wrong. We're trying to explain things to you, but we will not violate your privacy. Like it's still, like, it's still in my mind right now that this was a conversation that we had. You know what I mean? Like they weren't going to do that. They weren't going to, you know, check out what we were doing or anything like that. They had that confidence, and not that we were always awesome and did the right thing. You know, we were kids and we were foolish and we did whatever, but our parent, like, they knew that if they crossed that would be something that would be really, that would be a real problem. Like that the trust factor was really, really important. So our, you know, our we, my, I don't, coming to the United States where there's Islam isn't everywhere, you know, like Islam was kind of rare. We were in a community that decided to have like weekend school, you know, to supplement. And even we were like I always tell the students that I teach, like we were, you know, I was here before the mosque was built, you know, like that's how old I am. So the, you know, the mosque that you go to and pray, it wasn't here. I was here first. So for I think my parents, especially my dad, I think my dad, um, over, let's say in the Muslim world, let's say whatever that is, but there's no Muslim world. Like now it's Western culture everywhere. So everybody's got to be participating and like talking values and so on. Cause you know, you don't, whatever people are teaching. So I think what my parents realized is that they're going to have to, you know, they're going to have to talk to us a lot about what we believe and why we do what we do. And sometimes I think there were times because I was a wise guy, you know, because you're gonna rebel. Like you're not gonna, you know, listen to everything that your parents do. So there were times like when my parents, especially my dad would talk about like Egyptian culture, and I'd be like, I don't really care. Like I'm not in Egypt, you know. I think like I don't really care. I mean, I know that's rude, but like I was a teenager, and you know, what did I care about Egyptian culture? Like I'm in America, I really care about Egyptian culture. But when it came to the religion and like the idea of God, like that was something that like God is everywhere. He's not in a particular country. Like you know, you need to know this is God's world, and like he has rules and he has a certain way that you're supposed to live. So you better know this. So like all the stories of, you know, the prophets like Noah and Abraham and all of these, you know, that was at the dinner table, you know, or that was at the table where we would be learning, and you know, what's the you know, what's the moral of the story, and those type of conversations. And my sister and I mean, even for us, like I have pictures in my head of Ramadan, right? And Ramadan, you have to get up really early in the morning, right, to eat something before you start your fast. And you know, I laugh, I can still laugh now because, you know, I remember my dad getting up, and my dad's policy was he will eat the whole meal while his eyes closed, right? Because he doesn't want, you know, to wake up and have a problem going back to sleep. And like my sister, like, you know, can you imagine your dad sitting at the table eating with his eyes closed? What are the kids gonna do? Like we're gonna behave like, you know, wild monsters and laugh hysterically, making fun of him as he's, you know, trying to chew and everything. So like those kind of things are still in my mind. So it was, you know, it's kind of those morals, like, you know, like I still remember now, like one that, you know, just came to my head just talking to you. Like, so for example, like we believe that Noah lived to be like 950 years. And I don't know if biblically we have the same kind of concept, but I remember my dad saying, and when he was about to pass away, he said his life was like passing through a doorway. And I remember as a kid going, what does that mean? Like, and I asked him, and I'm like, I don't get it. Like, what does it mean his life was like passing through a door? He said, because when you go through life and you look back, it looks like it just passed like that. And I was like, look, I'm how old I'm a grandma. I still remember that. Like, I still remember that story, you know? So they had such an effect, you know what I mean? That they weren't talking about themselves. They were talking about these, you know, these great people and doing great things and, you know, responsibility to others. And I mean, the big thing, and I think in my life that kind of guides me now is, you know, love for your brother what you love for yourself. Like the idea that you're in this world not for yourself. you're in this world to make the world a better place for everybody else. In the process, the world will get better for you too, but you really need to keep an eye out for those who need help. Keep your eyes open for those in your community and so on. And nothing bad should be happening that you know about that you're not doing something to try to solve it. And that's why I'm never bored. There's never a time when I don't really have an off because unfortunately, as a kid, I remember thinking like because when you have parents who talk about these big pictures and these big values, I remember as a kid, and I share this with my students too. I remember as a kid, like wondering, like, why did God create me? Because like there's been so many people before me, like they should have solved all the world's problems. Like, what am I going to add? Like I really thought that, and I really because you're in school and you're doing all this stuff, and you're like, what is the purpose of all this? So I really thought all the world's problems were fixed, and I'm just kind of an add-on, you know. But then you kind of grow up, and then you see that they're not really fixed, and you have a responsibility to fix things and to try to make things better for people. And it's kind of awesome when you're able to do that. Like, and for us as like religiously, it's not necessarily that you're going to succeed. You know what I mean? You may not succeed, but it's the effort that counts. It's the effort, like sincere effort, that you really want, that we as human beings, like as Muslims, really we're supposed to take the time to look and say, if that was me, what would I want? And then kind of work to get there. One thing that, like, really, when you think like a passing thought right now, like, like refugees, for example, like you see like if you see pictures of refugees, you see these women carrying children. You don't know it looks like they are doing it so easily, but go pick up a child and carry him like that and see how heavy it is, like how heavy that child is and how difficult that is. And then having to travel all this distance with someone on you like that, and you're worried that you don't have a place to stay. Like when you start to think that way, then you realize your responsibility to other people, that this cannot be okay. This cannot be okay that there are people in the world who are living like this. It cannot be okay that, that people have a negative, feeling towards refugees. And like, there's a lot of things that need to be fixed in the world. And that's kind of what my faith teaches me, is like, this is, and you're here to make the world better, so then when you leave, you've left some sort of mark, you've done your job. So then we believe in like a resurrection and a day of judgment type. And so like when that day comes and you meet God, you can just say, I really tried. I really tried. I did the best that I could. And, this is what I did.
That's beautiful. And everything that you're sharing, coming from your faith experience and from the stories that you were told by your parents, and then it just it's the same as like what I would aspire to as a Buddhist, that I do believe we have a responsibility to make the world a better place, to contribute to the well-being of not only ourselves but others. And in my case, I really think about what it means to cultivate a sense of like happiness for myself, but not like a fleeting kind of just materialistic happiness that I would term as relative happiness, but something much more anchored in like kind of what is my mission, and then it's wishing that those around me also have that kind of fulfilling life for themselves. And so, to hear about how natural it was for your parents to speak about stories like, from Noah about life being like passing through a doorway. And I think the way they said it probably, with this like utmost conviction, this sincerity of like this, if there's anything that you take away from all that we're talking about, like, please, remember this. It might not be necessarily kind of, I don't know, that kind of curiosity about what's happening in Egypt or Egyptian culture. You said that you were somewhat rebellious against that. But when it came to matters that were as big as, God, then it's like, this was like the air that you breathed, right? So I think that, what a way to kind of be raised, to kind of have that guiding light. And and again, I think the message itself, like again, you phrased it so beautifully, right? You are in this world not for yourself. Let's kind of like carve that into a stone somewhere and it's somewhere visible so people can really see that. And it's not necessarily, like something that I think any one religion can lay claim to, but I think it's those religions that really live that and cultivate that spirit within their communities, like, and how you've experienced that in your community, I think is really amazing. So, this sense of mission maybe is another point that I wanted to ask you about. So it's clear that your mission relates to education, and also having students awaken to their own sense of like, how do I want to make the world a better place? But like, is there maybe could you provide more articulation of like how would you say your mission is in leaving this legacy? And perhaps it's a, kind of referencing some of the past, achievements that you've done, but like, perhaps think about the term global citizenship. How does that also kind of tie into your articulation of your mission?
Sure. So when I went into the school to work with the school, so out of I have five children. Four of them did graduate from preschool up to 12th grade from that school. So I always say like I raised my kids in the community, like, in this process. Because as I was telling, so what happened, Islam has been, I mean, it's a world faith, and really Islam is, we always say it's a way of life. It's basically that you believe that God in his wisdom created all of us, and that life is really complicated. Life is really complicated, but he gave us guidelines, basically like, here are the things that you do and here's what you don't do. Like, you don't lie, you don't steal, you got to do the right thing. Those types of things. So he kind of provides us these guidelines. And so what our mission in the world is that, God is all powerful and doesn't need us. And I mean, proof he doesn't need us is we die and someone else just comes and takes our place. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he really doesn't need any single one of us, but he's been kind enough to basically give us this kind of responsibility in this world, in that, even when you think about it, even the house that we live in, eventually we're going to leave and someone else is going to take it. Like, we really don't have ownership of everything. We kind of have this responsibility to take care of whatever we're given in this world, to the best of our ability. And it's so Islam is really when you were talking about the happiness, like it touched upon so even the word Islam, like you probably heard that we say to people assalamu alaikum, which means like we want peace for you. So what we believe is that God has kind of put us here, and the only way you're going to have that peace in your heart, that salam, because if you hear Islam, salam, the only way you're going to have that peace is actually like by abiding what God wants. In that God is all good. Like, that's how we see God. Like, God is awesomely good. I mean, just hang out by the trees and stuff, you see how awesome God is. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's just beautiful things everywhere, and the world is awesome. So like, God is like super awesome, and he's just saying, can you try to be super awesome to everybody who's there while you're down there? Like, you know what I mean? He's given us that kind of responsibility. But what has happened, as I don't want to blame all colonialization, but I can tell you, I was like, for Egypt was colonized by England, right? And so for me, as even up to third grade, I went to, sorry everybody in Egypt, they called it the English Grammar College. It's like I was in college in second grade. What was going on here, right? It was a British school. And, we felt the power of colonialization, like, the most terrible, we didn't feel like the really ugly stuff, like they weren't killing us in the hallways, but man, they were trying to kill our culture and kill everything that, you know what I mean? I still remember like, as a kid, I still remember it. We were, we were the other, even though this was our land, this is our home, this is where we belong. And you're making us feel like, we're less than you. I remember just not really being happy with these teachers. Like, what are you talking about? Even I always talk about one incident. where, our parents worked really hard to get us in these schools because they realized that that's the only way that, you know what I mean, that we have a future. So you have all these people who are, working hard to get their kids into colonizer schools. What are we doing? Right? Because they destroyed the public education system was destroyed. So there was no education. So here are all these people who are working really hard to get us into these schools. And I remember like a little kid, I must have been first or second grade, and these British people were not kind. They were not kind. And I remember it was lunchtime, and one of the students, my classmates, had like kind of a cultural food, and the teacher made a big fuss, like, who has that disgusting smell? I was like, you're a kid. Like you're a first or second grader, and this teacher is saying that, like, what? Oh my gosh, like, and she's saying and I didn't have that food, but I still, like, look how old I am. Like, my grandson is first grade, so that shows you like the difference in age. And I was sitting there with stomach pain, like praying that she wouldn't find that student and humiliate them. Like, you know what I mean? Like, just so awful. Like that. How could you do something like this to a child? Like, so like the colonialism, like when it comes to, to certain countries, they disband what, they mess up what you had as a system. And so just like, you know, different countries or different whatever, they break up religion and they have like a secular something and a religious something. So then religion is like only on certain days of the week or only for worship, which is totally against what Islam is. Like Islam is like, as I say, like it's a lifestyle. You have chosen, like you realize that you have a purpose. You have chosen, you realize that you have to do good wherever you are. So for me, I wanted, I wanted to be able to teach that to my children. Like I wanted my kids to understand that version of Islam, not the Islam that you just pray 5 times a day and then you're done. And then you could be mean and nasty and steal and rob no, that's not what the religion says. Religion says you have a responsibility to God that yes, you do pray, and yes, you do fast, but there's an equal responsibility to be a decent person to every human being around. Like that is really an important thing. And so I wanted to make sure that my kids knew that, I really wanted to. And I also, and so in the process of doing that, I was fortunate enough to be able to do that, as I tell them, with all their classmates, so, to be able to actually teach that and to actually live that. And, I mean, we did a lot of different things. We did community service. We, I think one of the greatest things that we were able to do is that in the neighborhood in where the school was, there was the township took care of when adults, when you have, I don't, let's see, people with autism, people with some sort of if they call it handicap, I don't want to say anything that's not proper, but when we know with them when we're dealing with them in schools when they're young, but then these people actually grow up and become adults. You know what I mean? And then these adults are actually being taken care of by their parents or someone. So our township would have like a day, maybe one day a month, where they would give those adults who are which is such a humongous responsibility to take care of someone who's disabled like this. And they would give the parents, those parents, like a couple of hours off. And then they would do activities with these adults with these disabilities. So we were able to get in on that, and we actually provided, the entertainment for, like, we played volleyball with them, we played basketball, we played games, we ate together, you know what I mean? So that was such an awesome, I mean, I just spent the whole time crying, like I was a big mess because it was just so beautiful. So I was trying not to cry in front of people and hide it, because it's just, I mean, you really see, like, it's the most beautiful thing. And the students, sitting down and talking with them, like, like there's nothing different. And to have that, and to see, like, look, you just took a couple of hours, you brought in grapes, you brought in crackers, you did this, and look at what you've done. Like, look at the impact that you've done. And so even it doesn't have to be big things. So having that opportunity to show kids like what they can do and, what they're able to do. And they did, and they did awesome things. They would go on to, do awesome things later because they had the experience of learning how to do that. And so, yeah, I just get to, just enjoy, things like that, and to participate in awesome things like that, that just yeah, just anytime I can do stuff like that, that's awesome. And to do that with students and actually have them see it with their own eyes, that look what I can do and here's what I can do. It was just absolutely great.
So beautiful. I love that last story in particular. And it was so funny. I don't know about it's funny, but it's interesting how I asked you like, what is your mission? And you shared so much about Islam as a way of life, but you ultimately ended on your students. And I think it speaks to how intertwined all of your lives are, and the kind of value that you have placed in your community, right? And the people that you love, and also in God, right? So it makes more sense to me because like initially I was like, yeah, certain values, but I think what I gathered from what you've been talking about with Islam, and you're educating me a lot about what Islam is that yes, we can say that they're individual values, but they're also like in every single like thought and action that we take, and it's meant to be seamless, not kind of relegated to just the weekend or Sunday service and what have you, but that you can't kind of break that up into small little segments, right? It's meant to be fluid, and inform like it's informed by the kind of core that you're building, especially at such a young age, because as you mentioned with the your experiences in Egypt, right? The behaviors of adults leave such a long lasting mark on us, that imprint, and it has the potential equally to be a positive one or a negative one. In your case, what you've shared, unfortunately, you've highlighted some of the negative ones, but it serves as this reminder for you about what you don't want to do for your students. So in a way, despite the fact that you still hold that trauma and you still recognize that as like a very kind of unpleasant memory, or a very confusing one at that. Why would an adult t make fun of me and bully me because of the food that I bring? It's my culture, it's my land. What? They're kind of, they're overstepping way too much. But nonetheless, you're able to create value in the community that you find right now, and I think that's, yeah, that's amazing. And again, the passion that you share, it's so beautiful. So this has been a really amazing conversation, and I've really learned so much about your incredible educator journey and how Islam has really informed and enriched your life and the lives of your community in so many ways. And I think that in the same way that you really have kind of showed why this is important, that interconnectedness, I think there is a place for global citizenship in a way to kind of have that heightened sense of awareness of like that value in community and in the anchor points that inform who you are. So I wanted to ask like a final question, if
Sure.
that's okay. And it's more so within the context of our conversation, if there's any book recommendation or movie that you, I don't know, kind of frequently go back to, or that you think would be relevant, considering this topic of global citizenship.
Well, I mean, um, for me, the book is definitely the Quran, which is the Muslim holy book, because all that we talked about is there, and for me, that's very much an anchor, very much an anchor, and it's something about the values and really making us look like that God constantly, within, we believe that's the final message from God to humanity. So within that message, he asks us to look around the world, and there's evidence of me existing. Like if you if you look around, I do exist. And I have a certain order in the world and how things are. And I was just at a lecture a couple of weeks ago, and it was someone who was and he was talking, and they were saying they were debating like, does God exist and so on, and it was a conversation between different people of different faiths and people who don't believe in God. And they said the one thing they just could not, they couldn't they just could not deny that God didn't exist, just because of the perfection or the precision of how things are made. You know what I mean? And so the, Darwin said, anyone who studies an eye knows that God exists. Like, if you just study any eye of any creature, like, there's no way that all happened by accident, or, like, there's such precision in things that point to a God who is pretty awesome, like a really awesome, like beyond awesomeness kind of being. And so that being, the way that I understand is, he didn't just put us here by chance. Like, you know what I mean? Just like if he's so awesome and placed the trees and the spiders and put everything, well, human beings are kind of a little bit more advanced than that. So they must have a purpose. You know what I mean? Like, they must have a reason for existing. And so this book, is basically telling me what my existence is for. And it's telling me, like, you know what I mean? It's telling me things like, oh, people will hurt your feelings, but you know what? You'll be really awesome if you're able to forgive them. You know what I mean? Like, you may want your revenge or you may want your justice, but the people who are really awesome are able to get over that and really and I'm like, gosh, that's wow. You're pushing me to something that's, you know what I mean? You're pushing me into a higher level. And so, this is like kind of my mainstay, in that I do read a lot. I love reading everything. I mean, I love everything. I try to read all the time, but this is kind of my anchor. And I would, suggest anybody who's interested, to start with that. And it is a little bit of a difficult read, but I don't know if it's that difficult. But anybody who needs help, I love religion and I love all of this topic. But it's kind of, it makes me as a human being realize that, you've got a lot of work left to do. You know what I mean? You're never, you do a good thing, congratulations, but there's more good that needs to be done. You know what I mean? Don't ever be like, I'm doing great, I'm just awesome. No, it's like, there are some people who did such awesome things, and have made such an impact in the world. And what I've learned in this journey, is the more you take care of others, and that you really do care. And that's why, like, my heart was really in education. And I really, I'm very happy how much work I did, to do what I did. But what I have found in this journey is, the more that you take care of others, the more that God takes care of you. Like, so, you got the one who created the whole universe taking care of you. You got nothing to worry about, like, so the more effort that you do to help other people and make their life a little bit better with whatever it is that you're able to do, then God takes care of you. And if I could, if there's one thing I would say, that I always wanted to tell people, like, for example, like charity. Like, like, I know we work hard to earn what we earn. I know that. Trust me, I'm a teacher. I know. I know the pay scale of a teacher, especially a private school teacher. So it's pretty awful at times, I know. But, if you give that charity, like, we have a belief that God never, that never gets lost, that God will give it back. And I would tell everybody, try it out. Like, try it out. It doesn't matter what faith you believe. Like, if you believe that there's a God out there, just give $1 or $2 and just watch. That $1 or $2 is going to come back, and it may even come back more. You know what I mean? It might actually may come back in a more. And can I share a little story that I tell my students, if you don't mind, Scott?
Oh, by all means. Yeah.
I tell my students, because I do teach, like, I teach this because, like, it's important to be charitable and to care about other people. And I was telling my students, so I opened up my wallet one day, because I try to do it like once a week or something. What's in my wallet? And I'm always the worst, because I never have anything in my wallet. So I had literally $7. So here I am with my soul. There's like a $5 and $2. And I'm like, which one am I gonna give? And I'm like, oh God, don't give the $5. You need that. So then I'm like, okay, no, I gotta fight that greed of mine, and I'm gonna give that $5 anyway. So I go, and I'm like, I'm gonna donate that $5 to whatever. I don't remember what charitable, whatever it was. And then I tell because this really happened. So what happens is, I go to school. It was a school day. I go to school. So I remember I just gave away $5. I go to school, and then a friend of mine, who I had bought her a ticket for something, and I said, and in my mind I said, God, don't worry about it. I'm, nothing. It's okay. If she forgets, she's my friend. I don't care. So then I had given away $5. She comes to me and she says, oh, Abir, I totally forgot about that. Here's $11. So I only gave away $5, and I got 11. And then later on in the day, right? Later on in the day, a relative out of nowhere, a relative of mine comes driving by, comes to the school. Oh, how are you doing, Abir? Are you doing fine? Whatever. And then this relative of mine says, Abir, you know what? I have $50 in my pocket, and for some reason, I want to give it to you. I'm like, no, no, it's all right. I don't need your $50. So I was like, okay, God, I got the message. I will never, ever, doubt that if I'm charitable, I'm going to get it back. And I would tell everyone to just, there are so many causes out there and there's so many things that need to be fixed. And yes, I know we get tied to our money and it's something important. But if you learn to give a little bit, somebody put it in a nice way. I don't remember who it was. It was somebody I remember heard that story and they said it was a person who was of wealth and he was very charitable. And then the more charity he gave, the wealthier he got. So somebody asked him, like, how does this work? He's like, I'm charitable and I use a little shovel and, to try to give to other people. But he said, God has a bigger shovel. So when he gives a whole lot more. So like, we need to we need to be in the world to solve the world's problems. And if we, this is my belief and this is what I teach is that when you care about others and you try to make them a priority, God's going to take care of you.
Wow, spoken like, well, in my mind, a true global citizen, because this generosity, this altruistic flame, this sense of purpose, is just, yeah, very in line with how I think many people conceive of this concept, and certainly for myself. And I just love how, yeah, you're able to just, share from your heart about, this background of yours and like this way of life and how religion has really uplifted you. And yeah, and it makes total sense. And I really appreciate you for sharing. So thank you so much, Abir. And I wanted to give like the last few words to you, if there's any last comment or just like a sign off, just to conclude our conversation. Thank you so much.
No, I'm so grateful for you inviting me. And I think if there's any, I know I'm just one person, but Islam has such a bad rap. It gets, the Islamophobia is so terrible out there. And, there are forces out there, to try to make something look bad. So it's just, I think we just have a really bad rap. And, I think, I pray that we're able to fix it. But, it's not a bad thing in my life. I think it's helped me to, find a purpose and to try to do the right thing. And I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful to God for all the opportunities and all, this life journey, and having the opportunity actually to try to do something in the world. And I think it's kind of a, yeah, it as they say, it fills your cup. So I'm happy with what it is.